Thank you. My name is Matt Wolfgram. I'm an education researcher at the Wisconsin Center for Education Research. And what we're going to, the title, STEM Pushout and Redirection. Dr. Baird wanted me to address the issue of why STEM, which is good advice because I didn't think to mention why. Our team has recently put out an NSF, National Science Foundation grant to study the experience of Hmong college students in STEM, accessing and barriers to success in STEM programs and graduate programs, and ultimately entering careers. There's funding for this kind of thing because the National Science Foundation has always sort of invested extensively in research on removing barriers. In this case, it's part of a program for removing barriers to racial equity for STEM education and careers. So that's part of the reason. So it's like, it's an important topic. It's an important topic that people are interested in. The other aspect to it as well is that we found some patterns that we're going to be talking about for the students that were participants in our research, in particular in relationship to STEM. Students, trying to access STEM programs and then being kind of pushed away. The title, STEM Pushout and Redirection, Institutional Logics of Disposability and Accountability that Impact the Educational Goals and Experiences of Hmong American College Students. So if we could go to the next slide. So this has been a really interesting project. I'm the mentor of this research team. This is our third year. We're actually winding up our third year, our third sort of generation actually of researchers. And this is our team this year. And I'm going to have each participant, each presenter introduce themselves as we go through the presentation. But the interesting, so we call this variety of research, we call this participatory action research or student engaged participatory action research. So the philosophy is that the investigators, the senior investigators like myself and my colleague Bailey and my Ning, who's here, we don't lead, we sort of mentor and advise and encourage. And then the students, who are themselves all Hmong American college students or former Hmong American college students who have concerns about their experiences in college. They design the research, they conduct it, and they are involved in every aspect of it. So I encourage you to view it as very different from like undergraduate research, where you have a PI and students who are given work tasks. It's student-led action research. The action part is, has to do with impact, practical impacts. So this is our research team. We've been done really well at getting funding. So we've had 3 years of research. Some students stay for 1 year. Some students, stay for 2 years. And it's been, we are joined by three new students for this year of research. So if you go to the next slide. So these are our general research questions. Again, I think these are sort of guide our whole project actually. However, we are, in terms of the presentation today, we're talking about sort of what are the factors that impact student success and I guess choice of major in STEM programs. So that's kind of like the more narrow kind of topic that we're going to be questioning today. Next slide, please. So I think one thing I really want to emphasize to this audience is that we have a lot of data. You can see here, it's a multi-year project. We have we have a large sample of students, people who are current students, students who transferred away from UW-Madison and or stopped out. And we also have interviews with alumni. We also have follow-up interviews. We did those in particular as the pandemic, the sort of experience of the pandemic was impacting students. And we did a pandemic follow-up. We've done, other kinds of follow-up interviews. We've also done observation, participant observation. The autoethnography is where the students, who, as I've said, they're all the researchers, they're all also students. And so reflecting on their own experiences and journaling and writing and thinking about that as a form of evidence. So that's autoethnography. I guess before I conclude, one thing I wanted to briefly talk about is I'm not going to talk much about our research methodology. If you have questions, like technical type questions, we can address them later. But we're going to get to the evidence. From this large sample of interviews, we're talking about it. We're telling some stories, giving some narratives about some individuals, sort of in-depth narratives today. So you get a good sense of how students experience some of the processes that we've seen to happen over the larger sample, the larger, the more holistic data set. So we're focusing in on some like individual stories that we've selected, which sort of exemplify patterns that we see across this data. So again, if you have methodological type questions that relate to things like that, I can address them, or we can address them later. Next slide. Okay, so my name is going to take over from here.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ning. I go by she, new, they pronouns. I am a PhD student in the Educational Policy Studies program here at UW, and I have been with the Paj Ntaub team since February of 2019. So today I will be introducing our analytical framework that we use for this presentation and this set of data. And also I would like to kind of start by saying none of us are political economists on the team. So when we were theorizing for this data, we were actually having to really jump into this new field. But I think it's really useful for thinking about this data and specifically with what we're seeing happening in the STEM fields. So political economists describe neoliberalism as the view of free market mechanisms as central to economic success, freedom, and democracy. In a neoliberal capitalist society such as ours, the purpose of education is to train young people to become productive or good citizens. And education then becomes the promise of this great equalizer for equal citizenship and access to a good life, or the American dream. And as such, the purpose of higher education then is to train young people for the workforce and to contribute to society as productive citizens should. We argue that schooling is part of the empire or nation building agenda, and that in this way, schools reinforce and uphold white supremacy and the culture of whiteness through institutional mechanisms that look fair and seemingly choice-based. Some of these mechanisms are things such as tracking, gatekeeping, redirection, and a lot of other processes that we will be talking more about in this presentation. And with these mechanisms too, students are rewarded based on merit or punished if they don't comply. But as we know from past research studies, these mechanisms are raced, they're classed, they're gendered, and they produce varying outcomes for different groups, which then set boundaries for who is worthy of being in certain fields, or in other words, these mechanisms serve as gatekeeping mechanisms into certain fields. In our research, we have seen that we have seen this most commonly in the STEM fields that students are trying to get into. Okay, so as I said, none of us are political economists, but for the purpose of this presentation, we are using a political economy framework in the higher ed context to theorize what's happening at the university based on our findings. And as such, we posit that disposability occurs when someone no longer benefits or serves the purpose of an institution. In this presentation, we will be using the concept of disposable subjects to describe the framing of Hmong American college students who experience institutional mechanisms that push out and or redirect them into eclectic majors, which may have negative consequences for their career paths. Since neoliberalism holds that there is a need for all sectors of the workforce to be filled, those considered disposable are still indispensable or necessary to fill positions in lower paying sectors. And also in a market-driven model of higher education, there exists this audit culture that places evaluation scale on all actors involved, including students, staff, faculty, and really anyone else. But by audit culture, we refer to the collecting of data to measure and evaluate performance outcomes of these educational programs and its actors. Some of these accountability measures at the university include things like program acceptance rates, retention rates, graduation rates. And we have also found that academic advising contributes to the audit culture by checking and holding students accountable to meeting these accountability measures and numbers, and therefore also is a way that, or is through academic advising, students are also redirected if they are not actually meeting these measures. So a program's success is based on evidence that students are graduating even in support programs, right? Resources and support is based on these accountability measures. So we see this audit culture kind of just impacting all aspects of the university, but it then translates to impacting students' experiences here. While we centered the student experiences with these institutional mechanisms in this presentation, in the next phase of our research, we hope to learn more about the institutional factors that impact how advisors do their work and how they are held to account by the institution. And I think Matt might talk more about that a little bit later as well. Okay, so before I turn it over to my colleague Ying, I want to mention that historically Hmong people's relationship with the US empire has been extractive and exploitative. And like I said, Ying's gonna go into more depth about this relationship in a little bit here. But I do want to mention that we see this exploitative relationship being replicated through higher ed spaces. And in our research, what we're seeing is that here at this university, most students, as with other minoritized students, serve and benefit the institution in a multitude of ways. So beyond the obvious paying of tuition, an example of how we benefit the institution is that most students and other Southeast Asian American students are considered targeted minorities. And so when most students and other targeted minorities are accepted into the university, the institution gets to kind of claim that diversity efforts are being fulfilled and that the institution is increasing access and providing opportunities to higher ed for underrepresented students. However, once here, audit culture processes create conditions of disposability for most students, and they are often removed from spaces that they initially want to enter, which include the university, and not just programs. I'm going to now turn it over to Ying to expand a little bit more on this and to also provide more historical context for the Hmong US empire relationship.
Thank you, Ming. Hi, everyone. My name is Ying Zhang, and my pronouns are she, her, and nu. I'm a UW-Madison alum in the bachelor with my bachelor's in human development and family studies, and I recently got my applied master's in human ecology this summer. And I've been with the Paj Ntaub Research Team for almost 3 years now, and I will be kind of drawing back to like some historical context for us to better understand how the US empire had always practiced disposability with racialized groups. And we understand that, that although the university is not the US empire, that the logic of disposability is similar to how these processes operate in higher education. So then in a neoliberal society like ours, it exploits people's labor as a sign of compliance and dedication to the US empire. And in return, people shall be rewarded or punished through their personal actions. So that question, that a very rhetorical question we have, is then what is the cost that people have to sacrifice for the acceptance, security, and trust, if any, from the empire. And so an example here with the Hmong people's relationship with the US empire is that they were illicitly recruited by the US to fight against the Lao and Vietnamese communists during the Cold War. And this involvement caused them irreparable harm that exploited their labor, separated families, and wiped out their communities. It displaced them as they fled to residing in Southeast Asian countries or immigrated to the US for refuge. And the empire continues to police how displaced communities perform compliance and gratitude to America, which I will talk a bit more about in the context of higher education toward the end of our presentation. But a prime example of how US empire dismissed their own negligence by disposing racialized groups was mentioned in one of the chapters of Ma Bing's History on the Run, when General Ring Pao was arrested for terrorism and framed as the terrorist ally, without the acknowledgement that it was the US militarism and intervention that put him in a position to continue defending for his community in Laos. So this case revisited the US's role in Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War and how Hmong people's fight for freedom in Laos was still happening. And also it portrayed how quick the empire was to dispose of Hmong people by repainting us as enemies to the state. And this isn't a unique phenomenon to just Hmong people, because the US has a repeated history of removing and displacing communities through their imperialist interventions in other countries. For instance, their imported colonialism of Filipinos and Mexicans, who all at some point were brought into the US for Western agricultural labor, and how they were racialized as foreign and separate from the American workforce. And at any point they would be, disposed as undesirable aliens, which did happen to both groups and is still an issue of immigration policies today. So it's important for us to, understand the logics of disposability here to contextualize how institutional mechanism of higher education impose disposability on Hmong American students. Excuse me. And then next, I'll turn it over to Janessa to introduce our data section on some of these institutional mechanisms.
Thank you, Yang.
1 second, if I'm sorry to interrupt. I think I just forgot to mention everyone. So we'll have time, obviously we'll have time for discussion later. And if anybody wants to, I forgot to sort of say, if you want to put comments in the chat as they occur to you, or, near the end of our conversation, that would be great. When we talk later, you can also like on your microphone and, if you want to, if you ask a question that way. So sorry to interrupt.
No worries. Thank you, Matt and Ying, for that. Hello, everyone. My name is Janessa Tao. I go by she, her, hers pronouns. I'm a junior majoring in community and nonprofit leadership with an Asian American Studies certificate with a Hmong emphasis and a global health certificate. I have been on the Paj Ntaub team since fall 2021. I will be introducing the themes of redirection and gatekeeping found in students' experiences. Redirection is where a student is pushed into a study that does not align directly with their career choices. For instance, being advised to change to a different major because of the student's grades are not the best. Another theme that we will be talking about throughout the presentation is gatekeeping. Gatekeeping is the institutional procedures in place that vet students' qualifications for academic procedures and institutional resources. Some examples are readout courses, major requirements, support program requirements, transactional advising, and advisor retention, which can all factor into whether or not a student is able to become successful in their academic career. It also inhibits marginalized students from accessing their goals. The gatekeeping practices may lead to different consequences, such as a student being redirected to another major or area of study differing from their original desired major, where there's usually no direction given to the student on what they can do with that major as a career. Protracting the amount of time at the university is an issue and consequence to the students. Another consequence is students being pushed out of and leaving the academic institution. With that, credits with no college degree are worthless, as is the debt they obtain through that. I will also be introducing counter stories that involve the ideas of redirection and gatekeeping that I mentioned earlier. Counter stories are the analyses of the participant's entire story. These include students, transfer or stop out students, and alumni. We have compiled a few of their experiences and analyzed them. They demonstrate gatekeeping and push out that redirect and transform the students' lives. As you can see on the presentation, here's a table that shows 3 of our participants that we put together who have experienced gatekeeping practices in their academic career. As you can see, these for the original major, these students intended to be STEM majors that which are highly competitive and have strict tracks for succession. But through weed out courses, which include organic chemistry, as stated through one of the participants, and other science and math courses, students start off with their GPA and grades being low at the beginning of their academic career, leading to many students struggling to raise their GPA and in their future courses. Along with this, students experience unencouraging interactions with their advisors, where they are redirected to other majors that do not pertain to their academic interests. And the consequences of having majors unrelated to their future goals, career goals, can lead to students leaving the university completely or not knowing what to do after college. I will now pass it on to my colleague, Chimeng Zhang, to go in depth on a few of the counter stories.
All right, thank you, Janessa. Hello, everyone. My name is Chimeng Zhang. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am a 5th-year undergraduate student majoring in education studies with an Asian American Studies certificate, Hmong Studies emphasis. I have been on the bilingual research team since fall of 2021. And so with the first counter story, right, that I will be focusing on, it is on Austin, who is a first-generation college graduate of UW-Madison. Coming in, Austin was excited to pursue biomedical engineering because he was interested in and excited to learn about the overlap on technology and medicine. However, we can see how gatekeeping, right, kind of kept him from being able to achieve that. And so one of the forms of gatekeeping he experienced when he entered college were the weed out courses, right? And with weed out courses, they're often STEM courses that are designed to exacerbate existing educational inequalities. For example, the large lectures, the curve-based grading, and the centering a culture of competition with other classmates, right, result in high failure rates, redirection, and college exit rates. And so with Austin, right, as a first generation student who did not have much previous resources within STEM in high school, right, he could feel that he was always behind, and he questioned why he wasn't succeeding when he had put all the effort into studying, as well as feeling like the pressure to step out of college. And so on top of these courses, right, the major applications were also another gatekeeping measure. Austin would apply to the College of Engineering by himself twice before he found out that you could only apply to it twice. And he was also warned by the College of Engineering that he needed to raise his grades during the times he was applying. And so Austin had to quickly come to terms on his own abilities, as well as decide other pathways to take. And in addition, right, Austin felt like his advisor was always focusing on statistics and grades when it came to looking at programs to get into. For example, he went to his College of Engineering advisor to discuss what he should do for the rest of the year in order to be officially admitted. However, he was not expecting to be told that due to his statistics and his grades, he was not going to make it into the College of Engineering. And so this advising experience was a form of gatekeeping, right, that would lead to negative consequences later on, which I will talk about. And then Austin also described being very lonely and believed that not being knowledgeable on the processes or not obtaining certain competitive experiences or GPAs, right, were his own faults. And so in a quote, he states, I never felt there was something there to guide you academically, mentally, or spiritually. I almost feel as if it was my responsibility because everything that I would need to know, I always had to take the initiative to look into or ask about. So I always felt like if I wanted something, then I needed to do it myself for it. I wish I had a mentor. I guess I never knew where to go get a mentor. I guess that was kind of my fault for networking. And so as you can see, right, read out courses, the major applications, and transactional advising experiences teach marginalized students like Austin that these experiences are normal. And so in effect, right, if they have difficulties, they're the ones who are blamed for not succeeding. And so with that, right, the consequence of gatekeeping was that it led Austin to be redirected. And so Austin ended up not getting into the College of Engineering for the biomedical engineering major after applying twice. And so he was transferred to the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, or CALS. And from there, he was redirected to the biological systems engineering major. And so just a little bit of background of this major is that it's a field of engineering focused in biology and chemistry that equips students with the knowledge on the biological and agricultural systems that impact food, fiber, and renewable energy resources. So this was completely different from what I mentioned earlier about Austin's interest, right, which was the focus on technology and medicine. And so Austin was not interested in agriculture or food engineering at all, but at this point, right, he was willing to pursue any engineering degree that was still possible to obtain. He did not feel confident going to this program and felt like he was being pushed into a last resort program. And along with that, right, Austin did not know what sort of career to do with this major, since progressing in a career is more difficult with a non-selective major. He had no sense of what major he was being transferred to and was just redirected to get into a major in order to graduate and meet the accountability measures of the university. So here's another quote from Austin that captures what he felt when he was redirected. I don't know. I think it felt pretty painful to transfer into CALS. I didn't get into the program that I wanted to, and I was going to a program that I wasn't sure or confident in. All of my friends, they got into their College of Engineering programs, and I was the one who failed. I was the one who went to the last resort program. I feel like there was a lot of shame and really not motivating at all. I think this feeling never left until towards graduation. And so from this quote, we can see that Austin was super devastated about having to change majors. And like he said, this was a feeling that never left until he had graduated. And so the institution, right, had failed to help him achieve his dreams and basically treated him as something disposable. Even though he graduated with a degree, right, with a degree in engineering specifically, he ended up in a retail at a window company after graduation. And so Austin's story is just one of the many where gatekeeping and redirection had greatly impacted his college journey. And so I will now pass on to my colleague Ping to talk more about another student's experiences with gatekeeping and redirection.
Hello. Hello, my name is Paying Moa. I use pronouns she, her, hers. I'm a recent graduate of the Health Promotion Health Equity Program with the Asian American Certificate emphasizing on Hmong from UW-Madison. I have been with the Bandel team since 2019. I will be sharing our next counter story about a student who we had interviewed as a current student and continued to do follow-up interviews until she had graduated. We share this story to portray how gatekeeping, such as the weed out courses, advising, and inconsistent information can redirect a student and potentially push them out of their major pathways into another pathway. Eden, at the time of the first interview, was a second-year majoring in pre-nursing. She wanted to help bridge the gap between healthcare workers and Hmong communities by being a nurse. During her time as a student, she almost always took more than 14 credits, with the exception when she retook a pre-required course during the summer. She has retaken a few other courses, which were always readout courses or prerequisite courses that she needed to do well in. Here on the slide is what UW-Madison's website on traditional Bachelor of Science and Nursing requires from pre-nursing students. This picture shows the 7 prerequisite courses that she will need to complete before being able to apply to the School of Nursing by her second year. To excel in those courses would help to keep her overall GPA for the program above a certain point and for her to be eligible to apply for the nursing program. She learned very quickly that there was no room for adapting to the college level of educational challenges, the culture shock, and other life changes, such as moving away from home. For nursing students, you can easily fall behind on the 4-year track to complete the nursing program if you don't do well in one course. Due to this and many other reasons, pre-nursing department advisors tell their students to have a backup plan or major fallback plan to fall on in the case that they don't get into the competitive nursing program. Here on the slide, we have a quote from Eden about her meeting with an advisor to get a fallback major plan. The quote says, "You must have a plan B if you know you're going to the School of Nursing." But then I think and ask, how do I know how plan B is going to be? They'll say, "Oh, what else do you want me to do? What else are you interested in?" And I try. There are times when they try to help me, but then again, it's just kind of like they're just throwing stats about the university. And bold were things her advisor had said to her during that meeting, and shows this sort of premature assumption that students won't do well or get into their programs. These advising conversations are reflective and realistic to have the individual reflect on whether or not they will qualify for the program. We understand that these are some very difficult conversations to have with students. However, the way these conversations are had has led to negative advising experiences for students. Referring to the quote from the last slide about Eden needing a fallback major, it becomes very frustrating and difficult when students are told that they should reconsider another path or another major, but have no steps on how to help the students achieve having a backup plan. This premature assumptions that students may not get into the program make students feel as though their advisors don't see potential in them. Assuming that student needs a backup major can kind of feel coarse and discouraging. In Eden's experiences, there were little to almost no conversations on an effective way to discover a backup major. She was simply given statistics about other schools that had higher graduating or higher success rates for graduating. For Eden, oh, I lost. But that didn't help her and made her feel as though her advisors care more about the institutional statistics rather than Eden's interests and needs. After multiple meetings with the same conversations, she started to feel that her advisors cared more about the institutional statistics rather than her interests and her needs. It's experiences like these that our participants have shared with us about time when they had met with their advisors who had shared discouraging news. It doesn't just have to be, "Oh, you need a backup major plan." On this slide, we have quotes from other participants, such as, "Your grades aren't good enough," "You're at the wrong institution," or "Have you considered transferring?" These are quotes from a few other participants that we had interviewed that are disheartening choices of words. Our findings have shown that students begin to feel discouraged and self-blame. They begin to wonder why they weren't qualified enough to excel in that pathway, and this can lead to pushing out the students from that pathway into another. We understand that advisors are also under institutional pressures and want to shine light on the institutional systems and processes. The requirement of a program and the standard of what makes a student qualified enough to be accepted into the program are part of the institutional systems and factors. Other factors are what makes students unqualifiable, that they become disposable in one pathway, yet useful in another pathway to retain the institutional's overall retention rates. Advisors are here to help assist and be a resource for students, providing guidance and accurate information for students. But upon further research and comparison to our data, we have seen that there may be some inconsistent information that is shared, whether that's between advisors to students or students to students. This was seen as Eden stresses about her GPA, her extracurricular activity involvement, and her graduating timeframe in one way or another during her interview. We saw this slide earlier in reference to the 7 prerequisite courses that Eden was on the pathway before applying to the nursing program, referring to the first photo. This was the same pathway for other pre-nursing students who we had interviewed as well. According to UW-Madison's traditional Bachelor of Science in Nursing website, we can see that the requirements to be eligible to apply for the nursing program is attainable. You can see that the requirement requires that there is 54 college level credits, a 2.75 minimum cumulative GPA, and a completion of 7 prerequisite courses, with 3 out of the 7 prerequisites in progress prior to enrollment of the nursing program. But our participants have the impression of needing a 3.0 or higher GPA for their application to even be considered. The bottom photo with the small teal square shows the admission profile of 2020 applicants who were accepted into the nursing program. As we see, the cumulative GPA and prerequisites GPA is well above that 2.75, meaning that the majority of students who successfully got into the nursing program had GPAs of a 3.0 or higher. Eden had shared that by her 3rd year, when it was almost time for her to apply for the nursing program, her advisor told her that her GPA wasn't high enough, that because it isn't high enough, her application won't even be looked at or considered, and she will automatically be rejected. So that meant that she needed to retake a few courses to get a better grade and to boost up her GPA. By then, though, Eden had already declared in health promotion and health equity as her backup major and her major. The challenge that no one told her was that since she was no longer a pre-nursing student, she no longer got priority to take those courses. Eden had to take the extra step and reach out to her previous department advisor for assistance in getting her in those courses. It's not just GPA where information seems inconsistent. Our participants have shared the need to want to graduate in 4 years. UW-Madison's traditional Bachelor of Science in Nursing website shows that as well. As seen in the top photo here, there's a teal square on the right that the time frame is 2 years for prerequisite courses and 2 years in the nursing program. But as you scroll down on the website, you also see this statement. The statement says, during the pre-nursing years, students completing all nursing admission prerequisite courses and requirements, in addition to all additional other degree requirements that are not built into the 2-year nursing program plan. This includes the university's general education requirements and coursework in the natural sciences, social sciences and humanities, electives, and nursing program math requirements, meaning that the timeframe for students to complete their gen eds and other degree requirements was not calculated correctly unless the students are taking 14 to 18 credits a semester. This shows that completing gen eds and prerequisites before applying to the nursing program would take longer than the 2-year calculated. Even other extracurricular activities or certification can make a huge impact on one's application for the nursing program. On the screen in the teal square is the review of applications. It states that successful applicants have strong academic ability as well as leadership participation in extracurricular activities, services, and healthcare experiences. It also states that they consider the professional goals and diversity, experience, and background, and that the admission is highly competitive, but is based on a holistic evaluation of each application. These are unspoken and unofficial requirements from the nursing program admission that students need to have prior to applying to the nursing program. Compared to the 54 college level credits, the 2.75 minimum cumulative GPA, and the 7 prerequisite courses that are required for one to be eligible to apply for the nursing program. Here are the extracurricular activities or certification that the nursing program admissions look at. Whether or not the student was involved in student orgs, volunteering, or have any healthcare experiences, all weren't required or needed for one to be successfully entered into the nursing program, nor was it part of the nursing program plan or curriculum. Those who got healthcare experiences would need certifications to qualify for those internships or jobs, such as being CPR certified or being first aid certified. But oftentimes to get these certifications meant that these individuals or these students needed to take courses or join programs and pay for these programs or courses with money from their own pockets. I do want to shine light on positive advising experiences that have been noted. Positive advising experiences have had its fair share of how advisors support their students through words of encouragement and refocusing the frame or lens on student advising. The way Eden's student support advisor approached advising students did not involve less critique. The conversations still consisted of reminding the students to keep a realistic mindset and to keep up their grades, along with words of support and acknowledgement that the student had their strengths and that they were trying. It also involved listening to the students' needs and concerns and taking or generating ideas on how to better assist the students. Redirecting the focus on the students' strengths and needs changes the priority and lenses into a student-centered advising, where the students understand the concerns of their advisor but felt heard in the advising experience. Through positive and comfortable advising experiences, students were given a safe and brave space where they were allowed to, not by force, build a mentorship-like connection between their advisors and self. Connection building between advisors and students that feels natural and genuine can provide an emotional support that isn't superficial. Eventually, by Eden's third year in school, she had chosen to have health promotion and health equity as her backup major and ended up declaring in that major. Fortunately, Eden's nursing courses counted towards her health promotion and health equity major and had graduated on time. She graduated with her health promotion and health equity degree, and she never ended up applying for the nursing program, even though she still had 3 chances, afraid that she would get rejected automatically. Similar to our previous participant, Austin, who also graduated in a similar major to their original major, not knowing what to do with that major. Now I will hand it over to my colleague, Lisa, to share our last counter story.
Thank you, Paying. Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Eya. My pronouns are she, they, nu. I'm an alum who graduated a year ago at UW-Madison, and I've been on this team for 3 years. Currently, I'm a research intern. This next counter story is about Mina. She was a student that was pushed out of UW-Madison, and she left during her junior year while she was in her biomedical engineering program. So again, push out means for in this instance, they left the university without graduating due to many institutional factors. Mina's story is an example of how the university extracts resources and labors from Hmong students while creating trauma through these gatekeeping processes and pushing out students. So yeah, Mina came into college very excited about learning and contributing to assistive technology and the other possibilities that biomedical engineering field could do. And she was really interested in the support that in the medical field for assistive technology in the sense for people with disabilities and a lot of Hmong folks who are manual laborers. So that was like what really sparked her interest into going to the biomedical engineering field. During her freshman year, she entered a dormitory for women in STEM. In the interview, Mina describes the courses using a percentile grading system, which means the classes were graded where only a certain percentage of people could get A's, certain percentage of people could get B's. So let's say everybody is neck and neck and really good. in that whole class, only like 10% of them could get A, as an example. So this grading would be kept, was a gatekeeping measure that created a really competitive culture within the classroom. And as many of the people on her floor had the same classes, and she would have to be preparing for exams with these folks, she talked about how when she asked to study with people on her floor, they would not want to do it together. And she explained feeling a lot of passive feelings from her peers on her floor. Here's a quote where she says how she responds to this competitive culture. When you finally come to college, it just really upset me that like even on the floor, there was women supposed to uplift each other because there's not a lot of women in science, but we were competing with each other just to get a grade. This support dorm that on face value is supposed to be fostering community building, and these classrooms that are supposed to be fostering learning spaces, learning new skills and stuff, were in reality isolating and a place to weed out students by forcing students to work alone, compete with each other, and in the process, seeing each other as competition, as the enemy, and instead of building stronger relationships, they harmed each other for a grade so that they could be more competitive for their degree. Mina will go on to describe the expectations to get into her major. This looked like taking 18 credits, participating in orgs, and doing internships, which she did year round. Her advisor, her support advisor, gave her a roadmap of what she needed to do so that she could apply on time. And so that is really stressed too, that they have to be making sure they're hitting all of these marks so they're timely as well. And so Mina, even though she had credits in high school and she had credits with her support program before she entered college, she was still behind. And she still had to feel like she was chasing and running to make sure she was on top of her stuff. During her semester, she actually experienced being told that her achievements were because of her race and because she was in a support program by many white peers and other folks like her boss. So she was, and every semester, Mina describes feeling like she always had to catch up. The only thing that really kept her going was the biomedical engineering degree goal and the mechanisms she built, like building community with dancing orgs she had with her friends, participating in Hmong orgs, and still showing up to some of her support programs, which were all the things that helped her keep going. Mina applied to biomedical engineering and was accepted, but one of the defining moments for Mina that pushed her out was the group projects within her degree. White students or students that had connections often got to claim more skilled roles or new learning opportunities within the group projects. When telling people like her friends and her advisors about this experience, many people would give her messages that this was the reality and she would need to fight for a spot in a group project. And here's a response that she gives to that. She says, it made me honestly super angry. Why do I pay so much money to come to college only for someone to tell me that I don't get to do something because I didn't speak up more? I'm like, no, you come to this education place to learn things. And these are the things that I need to learn to be able to do my job. You know, I need to be able to do my major. I don't see myself having this degree if I don't know how to do these things. Mina's frustration recognized that being told that it was her own fault for not advocating in the different roles for the group projects was solely putting the blame on her, rather than understanding that all students should be taught all skills needed for the degree that was supposed to help them get a job instead of competing for roles. So for example, Mina talked about woodworking and how a student could say they know how to do woodworking and would take that role. In her frustration, she's wondering why can't all students learn how to do this skill if it's needed to get a job within the field. And so after spending her whole life participating and suffering, getting traumatized for a system where the end goal is to get a good job and a stable life, she realized that every end goal, like a good school, which she got, and potentially a good degree had taken and would still take a lot from her. while simultaneously blaming individuals just like Mina for not doing enough. Yeah. And so Mina began feeling the community she built, like the org she was in, and the strategies she implemented to cope and survive could not stop the pressures that made her feel like she was always running to catch up. Mina states, I finally applied to my school of engineering and then I'm really happy. And then I realized, oh my God, this is not what I imagined. It's just a lot of things that I realized that this major was a lie. It's kind of like in high school, they told me like, this major is really good. You're gonna get a good job at the end. And then I'm trying to see the light at the tunnel and I'm realizing, oh my God, I've been lied to. After finally getting into the program of her dream, Mina was disappointed and exhausted that these biomedical engineering courses were still very isolating and competitive as before. They were not fostering learning experiences for new skills, especially for those who did not have prior experience, which Mina felt that felt she needed to ensure that she could get a job after this degree. And so Mina fell into a deep depression. She was unable to go to college with all semester, go to her classes all semester during her junior year. She stopped participating in the org she was leading. And when the second semester of her junior year came, she just no longer returned back. The participant at the time of the interview was working at a pharmacy as a technician, but she talks about years of hopping from jobs to jobs and being unemployed for a long time. For Mina, it was a struggle to understand what happened to her and to explain to her community about what happened to her. There was a lot of shame and inadequacy that comes out from being pushed out, and everyone knows the term dropout. So like that shame and inadequacy that comes from that term. Mina's heightened and deteriorating mental health was often seen as the reason why she left, rather than the institutional factors like the gatekeeping measures within the classrooms and the university that all compiled up to affect her mental health. Mina recalls the stigma of being called lazy and questioning her own efforts from her family, from her friends, her advisors, and even herself, picking at what did she do wrong? How could she have balanced her life better? How could she have studied harder? How could she have asked for more help? And this can be seen where she's like trying to grapple with these ideas in her own experience in this quote where she says, honestly wish that if anyone is struggling like academically, know that like it's not your fault. You're not stupid, you're not lazy, you're not a failure. Don't become like me and be bouncing from job to job just to figure it out. And that a lot of people will go feel ashamed about it. And it's sad to see that there's actually a lot of people like that do drop out and out of college, and you never hear about their stories. And I wish that there was better like retention too, because I feel like with my situation, like whatever happened to me shouldn't have happened. As you can see here, Mina's mental health and effort is not a reason to why she left, but rather a reaction to the gatekeeping that redirected her out. If there was any place that was supposed to foster her curiosity, build her skills, and allowed her to make mistakes and feel like an empowered engineer, at the end of it, it was supposed to be this program that she was betting on. So Mina's story really counters meritocracy as she followed all the steps demanded for her for years. She studied, she went to tutoring, she was on top of her classes, she led orgs, she talked to advisors, took internships, did research, endured microaggressions about her abilities for 2.5 years. And yet Mina's story shows the consequences of enduring the institutions and when you can no longer endure them. So we see students endure, some students change majors like Austin and Eden, some continue with the major and endure with that the traumas they experience, and some like Mina leave the institution before graduating. But as you can see, all of these folks experience versions of trauma from the institution. And all of these stories continue to counter what we are told about the role of the universities and their relationships with Hmong people, which our next presenter, Ying, is going to flesh out and discuss more about. So I'll pass it to you, Ying.
Thank you. So yeah, just to kind of reiterate like our argument, right, is that we we see that gatekeeping and redirection are institutional processes that frame Hmong American students as disposable subjects, while at the same time perpetuating an audit culture of higher education accountability by lifting the college graduation rates and suppressing the STEM program rejection rates of students of colors. And then these stories that my colleagues shared revealed a lot about how advising experiences and other gatekeeping mechanisms like redirected students were part of like holding students accountable to these measurable performances that made sure that they were, still benefiting and dedicated to the institution. So if students weren't doing academically well in a core class, it was easier to redirect them into an interdisciplinary studies than to provide holistic support for them to succeed in their STEM majors. And so that prioritization of accountable measures, it pushes out student from STEM and into a major that doesn't have a clear career pathway. For example, Austin's redirection from the engineering school to a Cal's biological systems engineering major, those were not built equally to provide him the knowledge and experience needed for engineering careers. And he eventually started his first post-grad job in a Windows and door retail store and still has the intentions to someday pursue an engineering career. And while he did graduate as a first-gen college student, he did bear the consequences of being disposed by the institution and being protracted from pursuing his career goals. And similarly, Eden's story demonstrated being pushed out from even trying the nursing program out. So she didn't even get a chance to apply for it because she was already redirected from that program. So if students were academically struggling, already being redirected before they get the opportunity to improve and try, then STEM program admission rates are not accurately portraying the struggles that students of color are experiencing to get into these programs. And so we see that these mechanisms produce real consequences that push out students into a study that doesn't align directly with their career choices, sets them behind by extending their graduation time and protracting them from pursuing their intended career field, or in extreme cases, make them leave the university like our participant Mina, who stopped out because even reaching performance benchmarks weren't enough for her to have equal opportunities like her white peers. So these pathways are mutual to the cultural system of higher ed that enables the market and centers whiteness in its ideologies, norms, and values. Because it operates within the neoliberal context, it rewards merit and punishes inefficiency, and is therefore driven by competition, as we saw prevalent through the higher ed programs, specifically in the STEM fields. And then the operation of the market then ensures that everyone gets what they deserve, disregarding the advantages or disadvantages of student backgrounds. And students who gain rewards will then feel deserving of them, while those who don't will internalize and blame themselves for the failures, even though the system was set up to produce these outcomes. So then this brings up the performance of compliancy. So regardless of most students being compliant to the institution or practicing never-ending gratitude, they will always pay a cost through their labor and livelihoods, because most students who enter the institution of higher ed are not separate from this logic of disposability. They are expected to practice gratitude as if they have incurred debt to the institution. So those who do follow these implicit rules, they are promised a chance to receive these certain rewards that have been promised to them, even if they are not necessarily what the students initially worked for. And then for those that don't, the system will reason that disposability is the consequence of not being compliant and not performing gratitude. So then this last slide here just kind of lists out some of the costs and sacrifices that most students experience in hopes to get the rewards that higher ed promises and values itself to offer students. So an example here is the expectations to perform gratitude to the institution. And that means, you are going to be beneficial and stay loyal to the institution by, possibly achieving the model minority and giving them that number for their minority student success that they need, and meeting measurable outcomes such as program requirements, support program requirements, and those different auditing culture requirements. And then some of these costs are, of trying to get the rewards will negatively influence student mental health or traumatize them as they try to survive the higher education system. As we've seen through a lot of the participant stories, they talk about self-blame. And that's because in this neoliberalism model, like when the higher education infuses market-driven, what is I forgot the word, market-driven model there. It makes students feel that if they didn't perform well, then it was their individual fault and not necessarily the structural racism at present. Therefore, even if most students try to be good for the university, it doesn't guarantee that they will get the promised rewards, like achieving financial stability, getting a dream job or a high-paying job, and attaining strong social networks. So at least with our research participants, many were, disposed through the redirection process, which we have listed under the punishment box here. So this results in students being pushed out from the STEM fields. And there are cases where being pushed out led to transferring or stopping out from the UW. So then the market-driven model of higher education conceals its harm and violence through meritocracy, making it seem as if success and failure are determined by individual choices and student abilities. And by prioritizing market-driven models in higher ed, it recreates stratified labor statuses by gatekeeping Hmong American students from entering the STEM fields. Therefore, Hmong students will always give more than what the university can ever give them, and the system will profit from their work and labor while continuing to demand gratitude.
Okay, thank you, Ying. It's my job to wrap things up a little bit. As I'm doing that, if anybody wants to put questions into the chat, there are some nice questions in there already. These questions can be, specific, like these ones are, or they can be more, could be more general or open-ended. And I'll also remind everyone or mention that this is the first time we presented this sort of theorized this model and presented it in this form. And so we're definitely like, open to, we're always open to feedback, but, we'd like to encourage feedback for this one. I mentioned at the beginning that the Participatory Action Research model that my colleague Bailey Smolarek and I are working under positions us as the mentors and the students as sort of driving the actual work. It's kind of ironic that I'm actually talking about the impacts, because it's really the students who from the very beginning have been focusing our research on like the consequences for Hmong American students at UW and more broadly. And I'm going to talk about that. And I know this is kind of a weird slide to conclude on, but I love like the diversity and the productivity of this research team over, we have an academic article here, we have a blog in the Hechinger report or an op-ed in the Hechinger report, various other publications, more academic articles to come in review and so on. So it's been a really productive, study over the years. And so in terms of impact, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our general impact first. When we first started, our team did spend some time analyzing processes that sort of obfuscated Hmong American student experiences at the university. And so we analyzed those and we drew attention through presentation and through publications to those processes and to the need for more visibility of the concerns that students had on campus. And then so that issue of sort of like the need for data was another thing. So if you go to the report in the middle, that's an important one as well, because we learned early on that the university, the UW as well as the UW systems, they don't disaggregate Hmong Americans from Asian, international students in one sense, or targeted minorities in another. And so the specific sort of, this is, an important community in our state and for our university, and there's no data publicly available. And so we got the data and made it publicly available. So that's an impact. Meineng, if you wouldn't mind the next slide. So we've been advocating for this, and we've gotten some pushback from the university as well as and some engagement from the university on these issues. Recently we had a presentation to the career and academic advisors at UW-Madison, where we shared some of our findings that you've learned about. Not really the theory part, but more what's happening to Hmong students, particularly in the advising experience. And we had a really great engagement with them. And we're talking about ways in which our evidence can be made available to improve advising for Hmong Americans, but also for students of color more generally, minoritized students more generally. Currently, we have a grant from the graduate school that's funding this work. And we also have a grant from the graduate school that's funding this work. We have an upcoming event. Actually, I'm going to put it here and then, okay, I'll put it in the chat in a second. Yeah, so sorry, thought I had it. We have an upcoming event that we're sponsoring. Kai-Ying Yang is going to be talking about this issue of data equity, and invisibility. And she's going to give a presentation. I put the details there, and I'll make sure that that flyer gets out to everybody on the list for the Hmong Studies Consortium. So she's going to be addressing this issue that's been really important, like how come we can't find basic facts about Hmong students in the UW system. Another thing is we'll be gathering together student activists and scholars from campuses in the UW to sort of think about the ways in which research can be, can inform activism. So that's some of our some specific tangible impacts. There are others as well. I think ultimately, the findings, the analysis that the students presented, what this can do is this can provide a model and provide empirical evidence to inform better programs to support STEM experiences, engagement, and careers for students of color more generally. All that said, thank you, everyone. And just let me say thank you. And I was just going to, I know there were some questions. I'm just going to, Norma has a question about the grade point average. I don't have that, we don't have that data in front of us. But I was wondering, I think you're talking about for the whole university or for the College of Engineering, but I was wondering why you were interested in that.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. First of all, thank you so much for this presentation and really appreciate it that the students